all-time favorite things to talk about because these guys are so creepy and mean in a way, but yet they're also just absolutely fascinating. And we have the Age of Absolutism, which I think is just dynamic. And when you hear the word absolute, you know, I am the master and the commander of my kingdom. And so you go back to the old Egyptian pharaohs who owned all of Egypt. There was no personal property. You were worshipped as a living god. Well, that is what an absolute monarch is. And a lot of their wealth in England and France and especially Spain and Mother Russia is going to come from primarily New World mercantilism, the transatlantic trade. And why this is necessary is back in the old feudal days, we needed to use feudalism as a way to pay for loyalty, to manage our empire. I don't have hard currency, so I've got to give you land. Well, now these guys have a ton of money. What's going on, Gary? Starting in the 1500s, Europe is going to go out when Columbus gets lost and lands in the West Indies, and they're going to slowly take over most of the globe. Mexico, Peru, Brazil, North America, make their way over to Asia, and they're going to dominate it for the better part of the next 500 years. Europe is going to be the epicenter of the world. A lot of it is due to changes in military technology. We have cannons, we have rifles, well, at least muzzle loaders, and warfare is now not this gentleman's game where we're going to go out with a sword and we're going to clink and clank and fight our way around. The 100 Years' War is going to ramp things up. Now it becomes the person with the most soldiers and who can move them from point A to point B the fastest is going to be supreme. Not only in continental Europe, but now we're fighting in faraway places like North America, the United States and Canada. And the cost of war, if you look at our daily cost, having deployed soldiers in Iraq, Afghanistan, even on the Korean DMZ, is just in the billions of dollars. It costs a lot of money. So kings only have a finite amount of money in their own kingdoms, so we're going to send out people abroad to colonize it, and then we're going to extract that money from the ground. Whether it's cotton, whether it's tobacco, whether it's gold, whether it's silver, we're going to take it. And so a monarchy who can get a solid financial base, who can garner a lot of money, can become an absolute monarch. But it's not easy because you're fighting against your own nobles. People who have been loyal, people who are almost as rich for hundreds and hundreds of years. So our first stop is in merry old England. Some of these guys succeed, and well, in England, they don't. All right, yes?
So what year?
This is going to be, we're going to go to 1683 here, all right? A little bit before good old King Henry VIII here. We're gonna go back to the 1500s and jump very quickly, all right? And we have Henry VIII. And Henry VIII of the old Reformation, near the end of his life, is pretty well off financially. He is pretty solid. He works with Parliament to raise taxes. Now, a lot of them are his buddies. And every time he asks to raise taxes on the rich, most of Parliament agrees with him, and they vote along with him because they like to feel included in the process. Henry tells them what they are going to do. Henry's daughter, Queen Elizabeth, the famous, Iron Queen Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen, she's kind of challenged early on. But she's a tough lady. Anybody who can wear that doily thing and not get frustrated by it is awesome. She does the same thing, all right? It's true, that thing is annoying as all. I could not do that. She goes in and deals with them firmly but toughly. And the taxes are fair, but they're getting heavier. But the Tudor dynasty is famous. Henry VIII took on the Pope, created the Anglican Church and, sent the British out on their exploratory, John Cabot, the guys looking around in Canada. And the people enjoy Henry VIII. He's a strong English king. His daughter is the same. And then she dies. And we're going to bring her back up here in a little bit. And that gives, 1683 is the grand crescendo. 1603, the early part of our story, is we get a guy in Scotland named James I. He's the Scottish king. And in England, Scotland is there, and we really don't like you, but, okay. We're all intermarried. And he becomes James I of England. He was the next in line. And he's a Stuart. And the Stuarts are we really don't like them, number one, because they're Scottish. And number two, some of them are something truly evil. They're Roman Catholic. All right? And what do we not like in merry old England? Catholics. We just got rid of them, and we're trying to purify the church, and now we got this guy coming down. Here's the real funny thing. Diana Spencer, Princess Diana, is a Stuart. So when William takes the throne, the Stuarts are back. Yeah, all right. I meant to say that the other day, and I completely forgot. But anyway, so the revenge of these Stuarts. James I probably isn't a bad guy. He's pumped. He gets to get out of Scotland, and he's coming to England. And he gets there, and he says, okay, what do we got here? Show me the spreadsheet. How much money are we working with? And they're like, well, we got some problems. And the fact is, we just don't really have a lot of money. Well, why not? Well, we've kind of blown it. We're sending guys over to the Americas, and we got a lot going out, not a lot coming back in. So we're almost broke. He's like, all right. What else we got? Well, we got a really fiercely divided church here. We're trying to get rid of Catholicism, and we still got them running around. We got these guys, Puritans, who are ultra strict, and they want to just cleanse everything, and so we're really not happy here. And England, at the time, was involved in 2 wars, one against France and one against Spain. And so James I says, okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to stop fighting. If we stop the wars, then we're going to save money. And he takes his young son, Charles I, and he says to secure an alliance, he offers Charles' hand to the Spanish princess. And she's like, como se, what? I don't want to marry him. That guy's just horrible. No say, no habla, no whatever. I'm not doing this. She says no. James is like, okay. So he offers his son's hand to the French princess. And she's like, oh, no. He's not good. And the Spanish are like, what? You can't do that. She was supposed to marry the Spanish princess. And James says, well, you guys said no. Well, you cannot marry her to the French. Well, the French are like, no, he's smelly, he's no good. All right, bangers and mash and fish and chips. And it's all the creativity they have. And then, when the French and the Spanish are mad, Parliament gets mad and says, what are you trying to do? You got to be one of those Catholics. You're trying to make peace with our enemies. And James says, people, we're broke. Like, I'm not trying to do anything fancy here. We're just broke. I'm trying to get us out of the war so I can reduce the taxes. And they don't want to hear any of it. And so James goes down as a pro-Catholic villain. And he says, well, all right, here we go. If you guys want me to do that, then that's what I will do. I will find other ways of making money. So he creates a new source of revenue. Parliament controlled the taxes. But James uses an old trick. He has his scholars go back through the English law books, and he finds out that if there was a law on the books before the Magna Carta, the king still had control of it. It was off limits to Parliament because it happened prior. And so he says, I'm allowed to take a tax on everything that's imported. And with new wealth coming up over from the New World, there's a lot of ships full of lumber pulling up. He gets the money. And Parliament is angry. He's like, well, it was on books, I'm sorry. Then, the Puritans come in and say, look, there's still these Catholics, you can't let them worship. And James says, no, what's the matter if they worship? Well, because they're Catholic. And he's like, well, isn't it the same, like, guy? Like, who cares? Well, they're not Anglican, and they're not Puritan, and they do stuff. We hear they even drink wine at Mass. Can't have any of that. We're like teetotaling here. And James is like, guys, I don't care. Like, whatever. That's really, in the grand scheme of things, you know, it's not a problem. He's like, my God, it was better back in Scotland than it was being down here. This is terrible. Well, whatever James does, he meets opposition. No matter what target he swings at, what he punches, it's still not enough. And so his children see him struggling with Parliament and the church. And James finally says, to heck with it, I'm going to cowboy it, I'm going to do it my own way. And that leads to trouble for him and his descendants. So the Stuart Dynasty is very easy to remember. There's James I, and he's got his son Charles I. Then there's Charles II and James II. So we're James, Charlie, James. All right, I'm very creative. And Charles, the young man who was tried to be married off to the Spanish and the French princess, saw all the problems his dad had. He says, well, shoot, my dad didn't like these people, so I'm going to do it my own way. And he really has difficulty. He just creates a lot of his own problems. And growing up, he asked his dad, well, why are we the kings? Why did we move from Scotland down here? And his dad said, well, that was God's will. God wanted us to be the kings of Great Britain, and so this is, now what we are. And he's like, oh, so I'm king by divine right? I'm king because God wants me to be? Well, that's awesome. That's going to allow me to do virtually anything I want. And he does. And so he begins to behave like he answers to no one. I've got an army, so I don't need you stupid nobles, and I sure as heck don't need you Puritans. And so Charles goes on a spending spree. He buys stuff, he arms stuff, he equips stuff, and he does it with taxes. And the problem is, when people speak out against his taxes, good old Charles grabs them and throws them in the tower. You spend 30, 40 days in the clink, you'll change your tune. When I let you out and I'm going to raise the taxes, you're going to keep your mouth shut. And like, well, you can't do that. There's the Magna Carta. And Charles says, the Magna what? Like, I didn't sign that, so I don't care. By the way, I'm in charge because God wants me to be, so I'm going to do what I want. And so, problem is, as he goes on his spending spree, Charles is a young guy now. He doesn't know how to manage his money. He goes broke. And the English Parliament at this time only met when summoned. Right? They only came to London when the king called them. Well, James, his dad, and Charles just doesn't call him. If I don't call you, you can't really cry about too much. But he's broke and he needs really to increase taxes, so he calls Parliament. And the guys get on their horses and they're excited. Their wives say, well, all right, you're going up to London town. I need, some Earl Grey from Twinings. I need some new cloth. Get one of those Paddington teddy bear beef eater things for the kids. And don't go out pub crawling with your boys. And if you want to go to the West Ham Manchester match at Wembley, go ahead. But watch yourself, mister. I'm going to check the credit card when you do. All right? So the guys, they go up to London. They're having a good time. Woo, London, all right, this is great. And the Beatles are playing and things are happening. And they're all excited. And they get in. And the king says, guys, I'm going to need some more money. And they said, well, king, we were out last night. We were out at the soccer match and didn't go to the pub too long. And we did some good stuff, went over to Harrods. And we had a good time, got some things for the wife. But we got this thing here you need to sign. Well, what is it? It's called the Petition of Right. What the heck is that? Well, what that says is you can't grab us and throw us in prison without our consent. You just can't do that. We're a parliament. You're subject to our authority. He says, wait a minute. What are you guys called? You're called parliament. I'm the what? Oh, you're the king, your highness. That's right. The king, singular. All right? I am the king. So you know what? I'm not going to sign your stupid paper. Get out of here and go home. Well, you can't dismiss us. Well, I just did. Parliament's over. It's called the short parliament. And the guys go home and they're riding through the dreary English rain and mud and the snow, and they get home and they're freezing, and they get in the house, and the wife is like, oh my God, you look miserable. Would you like some soup? Yes, and I'll heat your fish and chips up. And did you get my bolt of cloth? No, dear. Did you get the Paddington Bear for the kids? No, dear. Did you get my twinings? Dear, it got all wet. Oh, you didn't get my stuff, but you went to the pub with Ken, didn't you? Yeah, I know what this is like. No, geez, dear. I tried, and oh my God, the king's mad at me, the wife's mad at me, and Parliament's mad. All right? And they're really upset. And yeah, there it is. And so Charles needs some help. So Charles gets rid of them, and he hires a guy named Thomas Wentworth. Now, we have a local connection. Local Wentworth and Sloan Jewelers over in like East Park. They used to be on Franklin Street. Had my wife's engagement ring made there, so out that place. Well, talking to that guy like 20-some years ago, he is a direct descendant of this Thomas Wentworth, who got out of Dodge after some bad things happened here and said, you know what, I'm going to go over there to the New World. Thomas Wentworth is a financial mastermind. He says, my king, your highness, look, you're great. However, you're spending way too much money. We want to make more than we spend. So he literally gives Charles I like an allowance. This is what you get, all right? And when you spend it, you got to wait until here to get more. And for 11 years it works. Wentworth says, sir, if you can prove you don't need the nobles and you can manage your money, you can get rid of them. You can be absolute, but you got to watch your money. For 11 years, things go fine. And then his cousins up in Scotland cause a little scuffle. And Charles says, you know, we're going to go up there and we're going to deal with them. We're going to go put down the rebellion. But those pesky Scots there, they're tough. And the king doesn't defeat them easily. And he is running out of money, and he's forced to call Parliament again. He says, guys, I know it's been 11 years. We kind of parted bad the last time. Why don't you guys come on back? And they say, nope, not going to do it. Not going to give you any money. He's like, yeah, but... And then he loses a battle with the Scots. And he's like, guys, can you believe we're losing to those sheep farming, like dress-wearing hillbillies? All right, we really can't stand for this. We're going to need some help. You got to come back. And Parliament, who had been writing, communicating this time, does. And Parliament hands him a series of demands. They say, look, tough guy, we'll give you the money, but we are no longer going to be dissolved without our consent. And there can't be more than 3 years in a row in between sessions of Parliament. You can't dismiss us for a decade again. This is garbage. And oh, by the way, we don't trust you with the money, so if we do give it to you, we want to know directly where it's going. And Charles says, do you know who I am? I am the king. Yeah, you were the king, and the last time we were here, I got my tail chewed by my wife, so don't even think you're dismissing me. We're not leaving until we get what we want. And so this will become known as the Long Parliament, as it will meet for 13 years. All right. Well, Charles isn't going to be spoken to like this by a bunch of these silly nobles. He's a divine right king. So he goes and gets his army, the Cavaliers. and he rides in to attack Parliament. The ringleaders hear that he's coming, they sneak out and they run off, and this starts the English Civil War, which runs from 642 to 649. And the king is leading his military men, his close nobles, his soldiers, the cavaliers, known for their interesting helmet and their long golden flocks, kind of like Three Musketeers. It should be a beatdown. Like, the members of Parliament should not have a chance. But they're known as the Roundheads because they choose for their leader a guy named Oliver Cromwell. And he gave the bowl cut, like put the old bowl on your head and cut around the horrible haircut that was. He gave it its namesake. So here are the Cavaliers, and here's good old Oliver Cromwell. And Cromwell is a stodgy, boring guy. But he turns out to be not only an organizational genius, but a military one as well. And the problem with the English Civil War is that everybody in England has to pick a side. Peasants and nobles have got to back the king, and peasants and nobles have got to either that or back Parliament. And you better be sure you pick the winner, because there's going to be consequences for the loser. Well, this shouldn't even be hard. The Cavaliers should win, but they don't. And in 649, King Charles is captured in battle. He is imprisoned, and he is the first and the only English king to be executed. If you go to London, and there's a tower, directly across the street is an old pub called Hung, Drawn, and Quartered. Hung, Drawn, and Quartered, it used to be in the old school, you would go in, and the dishes were named for famous people who were killed. Like Anne Boleyn's head was like shepherd's pie. King Charles' head was like bangers and mash. And literally like William Wallace guts was fish and chips. So I always got, and the stone where William Wallace was disemboweled is like right there in front. It's where all the big, enemies of the English state were like executed. I lay in freedom, and people are like, oh, silly American. Had a box of Kleenex in my coat. It was interesting. I think that was on Nate's trip. I don't remember, but it's one of them. So anyhow. Now Charles took his death well, and because he was a royal, they hired a special, a lot of times they bring like the axe, and so you swing it and you miss, or you don't get all the way through, so you're like nearly headless Nick from Harry Potter. But if you were rich, or you were a royal, they would hire a French executioner to come with a big, heavy, sharp steel sword, and it was one swipe. So Charles goes to the execution stand, says, "Hey, people of England, I meant you no ill will. I was trying to be a good king. No hard feelings. We're all good." Executioner, mind if I pray for a moment? He gets down and says his prayers and turns and gives them a nod and puts his head on the block, and he gets beheaded. Once again, it would take a lot of guys to get me up there. I'm not going to go cool like old Charlie. I'm like, you better bring, better get a taser, a couple other little things, hog timing, because the kid ain't going easy. So he's done. And Parliament dissolves the monarchy. The British monarchy is now done. And this shocks the rest of Europe. I mean, William the Conqueror and Alfred helped create the first modern nation state. How did they get rid of their king? What's going on? We thought those Stuarts were doing well, and they declared themselves as a commonwealth with good old Oliver Cromwell as their leader. And Cromwell's like, ha, now I'm in charge. And oh my God, was he boring. He was a Puritan, very strict. Again, I'll use the old Amish analogy. Theaters were closed. Pubs were closed. You couldn't play soccer. You couldn't play loud music. You couldn't dance. You had to dress in navy blue, black, or brown, and it was boring. God, can't we go have a pint with the lads? No. Can't we go and dance a jig? No. Can't we do one of them Shakespeare plays of like, you know, intrigue and love and jealousy at the Globe? No. What can we do? Read a book. All right, preferably the Bible. And he declared you have freedom of worship as long as you were a Protestant. Lutheran, great. Anglican, great. Was John Calvin things great? Can we, Catholic? No. No. I don't want any of that here. That's caused enough trouble. And that's the way it goes for years. And people are like, oh my God, as bad as Charles was, at least we could have some fun. And up there in Ireland, all right, getting ready for St. Patrick's Day, is Charles II. And he had tried several times to lead some military incursions to get his job back. And the nobles are going to swing over and say, hey, Charlie, if we get rid of Cromwell and put you back on the throne, what are you going to do? Well, we're going to have some theaters open. We're going to open some pubs. Okay, enough said, done. All right, great. Play soccer too. Awesome. And so Charles II is Charles I's son. His dad just got executed, and he's kind of like a young guy, and he was very cool. He had, you know, he was just a very good talker. He was considered a handsome guy. He told good body jokes, and he was that guy, kind of Julius Caesar-ish, where he could put on the fancy suit and hang out with the hoity-toities at the country club, and he could put on a Carhartt and go down to the local pub with the fellas and talk like power tools and like NASCAR. He could, you know, do all, he was a blue collar guy, he was a rich guy, and he comes in saying, all right, man, we are going to have us a good time. So in 658, he has returned to the throne because people are tired of the boring Puritanism. And so he says, look, you guys in Parliament want to meet? Awesome, don't care. All those boring laws of Cromwell, gone. And the problem with Charles is he was trying to become absolute, but he wants to do it very subtle. And he's not very good at it. And he has this crazy idea of being a king with religious tolerance. He's like, look, you know what's dividing us is this religious thing. You want to be Protestant? Be Protestant. You be one of those Calvinist dudes? Awesome. You want to be Catholic? It's okay. Go to Mass. And Parliament's like, whoa. We're good with everything, but sir, you cannot be an English patriot and be pro-Catholic. And he says, well, really, what does it matter? Right? If all this trouble is caused, who cares where you go to church? Well, it matters. And then they find out that his very good buddy is the King of France, a young guy named Louis XIV, who's crazy rich and crazy Catholic. So what Charles II does is he avoids many confrontations with Parliament. He lets them meet and agrees to what they want, and then he goes and does something different. And he doesn't think that anybody is going to catch him. And they do. Luckily for him, he gets sick and he dies of tuberculosis, so he's done. His brother, the last in line here, James II, takes over. And James is a spoiled brat. He was in the royal family speak the spare, right? All right, Charles I was the heir. I'm just the other guy. I'm Harry. I can go drink and have fun and do whatever because nobody really cares what I do. So, oh, wait a minute, people are looking. Oops, sorry about that. So he decides to take over, and his problem is he's blatantly pro-Catholic. He's mad that these guys killed his dad. He was forced to live in exile, and when he was forced to live in exile, he went to live in France. And over in France, they really loved him, and they were all Catholic. So they really like me, and you idiots killed my dad, so I'm going to do whatever I want. And so he abolishes laws that Parliament passed. They go, well, you can't do that, just did. Well, you can't do that. Do you want to go to jail? Open your mouth again, I'm going to throw you in jail. And he surrounds himself like a small secret police force. And then he appoints known Catholics to high governmental positions. And they're like, you can't do that. And he says who? Well, we do. Well, I'm the king. Show me where it says in English law that this guy can't be a Catholic. You can't do it. You know why? Because it's not written down and I'm the king. And people are getting angry. And he makes a decree that says anybody in England who wants to worship as a Catholic can go ahead. And he says every Anglican bishop, every Anglican priest must publish a flyer in the back of the narthex that says, if you have any congregation members who are Catholic, I'm going to reopen their churches. And 7 bishops won't do it. And so James has them arrested. Now you can get away with a lot. You can run your mouth, you can flaunt laws, you can tell Parliament, show me where it is, it's not written down. And you'll get a little, probably flack for it, but you're the king. But what people won't settle for is throwing their bishops in jail. You can't grab a little old man who's been a bishop all his life and throw his butt in jail because he won't post a piece of paper. But he does. And James says, what I'm going to do is make all English institutions subject to my power. Where we've gone wrong is you idiots in Parliament think you have to say things. Look around Europe. Nobody else has you knuckleheads, so we're going to do this my way or it's the highway. And that was just a little bit too much for people to swallow. So up comes the Glorious Revolution, which isn't a real revolution, and it's in fact not even very glorious. It's kind of boring, but it works. They look over and they find out that James II, his own daughter, is a Protestant. And she's living over in the Netherlands, married to a guy named William of Orange. So I think I threw this out last week. Why are all the Dutch speed skaters wearing orange when their colors are red, white, and blue? Well, it's because of the House of Orange. William of Orange was the big, mighty, duke living in the Netherlands, and he gets invited to be the English king. He's married to the king's daughter, direct descendant, so he goes over there and is asked to take the throne. They put him on a boat, and they sail over to Dover, and all of Parliament is there, and William and Mary step off the boat, and they're like, oh, your Highness, would you like a carriage up to London, or would you like to sail up the Thames with the tide? And poof, William and Mary are now the king and queen of England. James is like, you can't do that, you can't do that. And when all of England turns on him, he's forced to flee, and he goes into exile. Now, William and Mary, before they're allowed to sit in the palace, have to sign a document, very important document, known as the English Bill of Rights. It is the precursor to our own, where some, not all in England, have the right to freedom of assembly. They have the right to freedom of speech. If they're in a certain area, they can say whatever they want in Hyde Park under no fear of retribution whatsoever. And what it does is it guarantees the rights of upper-class nobles. It is not a Bill of Rights for every man, woman, and child in England. It's not the peasants. It's the upper middle class and the nobles. But what it does is it legally binds the king to Parliament. The king is now subject to the will of Parliament. English monarchs will never become absolute. They actually write it down because James II calls them on it. If William and Mary don't have an heir, right, we're not going to go get anybody else. The throne will pass to the House of Hanover in Germany. And so the current royal family are really German. The House of Hanover, King George I comes in 1714. His problem is, he's German. He doesn't speak English. He's not from England. He says, well, shoot, it's got to be better than Germany.
Weather sucks.
Yeah, weather sucks. It's gray. It's like being in Cleveland. It's horrible. Get me the heck out of here. Right? It's got to be better than England. Oh, well.
Just, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, bam, here are the Hanovers.
Yeah.
What was the connection of the Hanovers
The
to
connection-
the Stuarts?
There was absolutely no connection, but the Hanovers were the ancient ancestors, the powerful Holy Roman ancestors of the Duke of Orange.
Okay.
So they were Protestant direct descendants. We want to make sure no stinking Catholics get on this throne. That's for a couple years ago when Prince Charles' buddies got married in Ireland, and he was, one of the groomsmen, and they gave him flack, and he's like, "Dude, it's my buddy. It's like Catholic Church, but like we're in there." Like, "Oh, you can't do that." He's like, "It's not the 1600s." All right, so he's the king, but he's the first one who's going to come in that's not English. That's going to be subject to Parliament here. Here's Mary, here's William. It's a nice old wig he's got, like rocking. And here comes King George I, kind of like part in the middle, feathered back, like 1980s mullet style. That's what it was probably at. All right. Thing is, that had to be hot and itchy. I don't know. So anyway, King George I is lucky. He gets a guy named Robert Walpole to help him out. And Walpole is a guy that I really like. He creates what's known as the cabinet system. First of all, our king can't speak English. He's a German guy. He really doesn't know what's going on. So we've got to get a close inner circle of supporters. And one of the themes that runs through absolutists is they get a close, hardcore group of supporters. A very small inner circle that you can trust. And Walpole starts it here in England. And when they have conversations, Walpole, like the real first prime minister, says, "Look, inside this room, we can disagree. If you disagree with the king, feel free to say so. But when a decision is made, whether you love it or you hate it, when we go out in public, everybody speaks with one voice." All right? We're not going to say, "Oh, well, I disagree with the king." No. Disagree in private. In public, we're all going to show our support, or this thing is not going to work. You have to publicly agree with the king. And Walpole is a great bridge. He's a great conduit getting Parliament and the king to slowly come together and work together. And it becomes a great success story for most of Great Britain. But remember, Parliament is not a representative institution. This is not a democracy by any shred of the imagination. These are the elitists, and they're going to do things under the guise of helping everybody, but it's mostly done to benefit themselves. But England, because they're disconnected, because they got the cabinet system, because they got Robert Walpole, they are a little freer than everybody else. They do have freedom of the press. They do have limited freedom of the speech. And it brings the people of England together. They get a small boost of nationalism here. They're not caught up on the wars on the continent, and so they can turn their attention to building the empire on which the sun never sets. We're not going to mess around with Europe. Let's go over and let's see what we can find. And the key thing, at least in England, is the king's power has definite limits. And while it's mainly a good old boy system, the king and the parliament cannot just dismiss the interests of the peasants. You have to listen. And this allows a small island country to go out and dominate the world. And while England fails in its quest for absolutism, I think they come out better in the long run because they're focused on exploration and colonization, building that empire again on which the sun never sets. So that's the Stuarts. They fail, but they will be back as soon as William gets on the throne. So, where they failed, France is going to succeed by just the most beyond wildest imagination expectations. And Louis XIV, I think if you gave him a Mensa test, is probably a genius. An evil genius maybe, but he's still a genius. And he does things that are kind of weird, crazy, awesome. But if I could be an absolute monarch for an hour, he's the one that I would pick. I would want to be Louis at least for 1 hour. And French absolutism is geared around these two guys. This is Chief Minister Mazarin, the political prime minister, and this is evil Cardinal Richelieu from the Alexandre Dumas Three Musketeer novels. And nobody had a spy network as deeply embedded in all of Europe than Cardinal Richelieu. Man, he is some piece of work. He is not a nice guy. He was born a peasant, and he goes to seminary and becomes a priest, and through kind of blackmail and force of will and knowing this person and that person, ascends to the heights of the Roman Catholic Church. So he is the Pope's representative in France and a close advisor to Louis XIV's dad. And what these two guys do is they say, you know what, we know we can never be king. We can't get there. But the more power our king gets, the more we get for ourselves. And so they encourage the king to be heavy-handed. If a noble pops off, throw him in jail, confiscate his property, take his land. And as a result, there are several rebellions that have to be put down, and people try to assassinate the king. And growing up watching this as a tiny little boy who he himself is almost assassinated. And the little kid watches all of this, and he will become king at the age of 4. And he says it was at a very early age that he decided here in the 1640s that when he got to be king, he was going to try and concentrate all power on himself. He was going to do it without Mazarin and Richelieu because their heavy-handedness, Louis felt, contributed to his dad's demise. But Louis is going to be like that ultimate Professor Moriarty, all right? He's going to do things subtly and layer by layer at a time. So individually, when you see it, you don't really think anything of it. You guys doing okay?
Yeah.
Is it bread, coffee, Coke, anything? No? All right. You guys all right. Mark, you're ready to fall asleep, dude. So I know what you're doing.
No.
All right, yeah. But when you add up all of those different layers, everything was pre-planned and premeditated and done for a purpose. And by the time you realize it, Sherlock Holmes isn't there, it's too late. Well, that's what Louis is doing. He wants to get rid of the nobles, but not overtly destroy them, but subtly knock the power out from underneath them. And when he's 21, Mazarin and Richelieu both die. And people are expecting, well, who's going to be his new prime minister and who's going to be his new religious, advisor? And he says, well, I'm going to do it myself. I got this. All right. Oh, you stand up, move around, man. Come ahead. All right, you're good. All right, yeah. All right. So anyway, so what he does is a pretty interesting thing. He wants his nobles to maintain like the illusion of power. So what he does, while he destroys their power nationally, he lets them be rock stars at home. And he will even get in his horse and carriage, and he's going to go out to Leuven, and he's going to see good old Dries. And he rides into Leuven, and he's doing the parade wave, and people getting out their cameras. Oh my God, here comes the king, and here comes the king. And we go out and we pull up to, Dries' chateau. And we're like, hey, Dries, what's going on? People are saying, oh my God, the king is coming to see Dries. What's he doing? This has never happened. We'll stop, we'll pose for the cameras. All right, it'll be awesome. All right, we're going to go in the house. I'm going to say, Dries, it's really lovely here in Leuven. Tell you what we're going to do, cowboy. I'm going to go back to Paris, and I'm going to do a bunch of things, and you may not like them, but, well, you're not going to say anything, okay? Because if you do, well, this place here, well, it'll probably like burn down or something like that. Right? So what you do here, keeping control locally, awesome. I don't really have time. The stoplight goes out at the corner of High School and Homestead Road, Leuven, That's your problem. I got bigger things to worry about. Are you good with that?
Sure.
Awesome, man. All right. We leave. Well, a couple croque monsieurs, a couple crepes, right? We leave, and the people are going, oh my God, our Lord Dries must be so awesome because King Louis came all the way out here to Belgium to see him. Sorry, we're going to have some frites, we'll pound some waffles, get some of your uncle's chocolate. It's going to be fantastic, all right? And I go back to Paris, people are like, oh my God, Dries must be some kind of dude because the king came out here to see him. Louis like, you just stay in Louvain, all right, and let me run this show. And much like all the other guys we're going to talk about, he forms a small bureaucracy. And I remember my uncle, who was Secret Service for a long time, said starting somewhere around the Carter-Reagan years, the presidents were meeting with about 52 people a day, right? Advisor of this, secretary of that, this person, that person. And I'm like, how? It had to be exhausting, all right? You get like 5 minutes here, 7 minutes here, like their schedule is down to like the actual minute. Well, these guys don't have time for that. So Louis gets 3 ministers, 3 guys, one on foreign affairs. Who are we allies with and who are we going to war with? Number 2, I need a secretary of, I need a head of the Joint Chiefs and domestic policy. What's going on here inside of France that I need to know about? These 3 guys had extensive staffs. But every morning, they came in and they sat down with Louis. Louis was like, what do I need to know? He could spend an hour or 2 with each one because there were only 3. And nothing got done without Louis' approval. And he picks for these staffs people who were old, long-trusted family friends or brand new nobles that Louis handpicked. So their wealth and everything they had was tied directly to Louis. You get rid of me, that nice house you live in, the nice job you have, the nice private school your kids go to, well, poof, it all goes away. You got that, Dries? All right. So it makes them tied to him, so they can do nothing without him. And again, he does this slowly but surely, layer by layer by layer. And some of the other nobles, he allows to benefit from his power, like going out to seeing Dries. And, you know, and the more power I get, the more things you get. The people of France are happy. This is going to be awesome. But I need a centerpiece. I need something to show off. And here's where absolutists do good things, but they also make mistakes. When we're super rich, we want to build a really big house. Why? Because we can. We're going to build one awesome. And I'm living in the Louvre. And this place is stodgy. It's here in the, you know, Isle de Paris. And it's really just not big enough for me. I mean, some idiot said if you went around and read every exhibit for 1 minute in the Louvre, it would take you 3 weeks to go through the whole thing. So I just need some more square footage. I feel kind of cramped in here. So I'm going to go 12 miles outside the city and I'm going to build the Palace of Versailles, the setting for the Sun King. Perfectly picked and placed because that's where Louis wanted. It was his summer cottage. And he's a master of propaganda. When it was unveiled, there were like little sparklers were set off, and he was lowered through a trap door, dressed like a conquering Caesar with his young son in his arms. How's that for a dramatic entry? People, let me give you my Palace of Versailles. And it's awesome. And that's where he begins to really turn the screws into the nobles. It's brilliantly thought out, but it's so big that it consumes half of France's yearly tax revenue to maintain. Now, Louis is rich. He's crazy rich. 50% goes right here. And he organizes his court around this bizarre etiquette. He's into something known as patronage. And here becomes the original setting of the palace of Versailles. The gates are still there. They now built a connecting, like kind of like a stable. It's where you would go in. And back here is one of those cool things. One day, this is his court etiquette, you had to do what Louis wanted to do. And he would do things slowly but surely to humble and like dehumanize the court. So one of his favorite things to do was he had a human chessboard. And people put on black and white robes and he'd play chess with you. That was one thing. Right? The other thing he would do is he would put jewels around like geese or like pigs and set them off and make people chase them, and the person that caught it got to keep the jewel and got to sit next to the king at dinner. If Louis got up at 2 a.m. and wanted to have a masquerade ball, you got up at 2 a.m. and had a masquerade ball. If Louis wanted to have a turkey dinner at 6 a.m., then you had Thanksgiving at 6 a.m. He didn't like knocking. That annoyed him. So everybody had to grow a big fingernail, and they would kind of scratch at the door. It's kind of like an 80s like Coke dealer or something. Everything was, pre-planned. And so one day they were playing cards and drinking, and a princess of Austria with a little bit too much to drink came in and sat down at Louis's table. Well, she wasn't invited. She was a little giddy, a little annoying. He gave a head nod. She was escorted from the palace. Her luggage was taken out of her room and thrown out front, and she was excused. And that's just how Louis was. Now, how has he got to get rid of those nobles? I got Dries, he knows his place, but you want to keep your friends close and your enemies closer. So Louis forces all of his nobles to build a chateau in Versailles. So Ken's got to build a house. All right, Meredith's got to build a house. Mark's got to build a house. Leanne's got to build a house. Everybody's building houses. And it became a game of one-upsmanship. Whatever party we did the week before, the next person had to do something even bigger. All right? More money, more audacious, more spectacular. And what's the old saying? To hang out with really wealthy people, you got to be really wealthy. And little by little, Louis making them all go broke. All right? They're like, oh God, Louis, look, man, I'm like broke, but I'm a noble. Like, can you help me out? And Louis says, well, I probably can, but it's going to cost you. One day I may call for a favor. When that day comes, you can't say no, or I'll get Luca Brazzi and you'll be sleeping with fishes. It's very mafiaistic. All right? I'm going to tie everybody directly, but everyone's having a good time. Nobody knows the man is doing this on purpose, so he can get rid of you and run everything all by himself. Some of the things he had people do are just insane. Not my best picture, but here's the famous Hall of Mirrors, and Louis is going to sit between these two golden cherubs, and he has these mirrors built. And they're nice, and you go through there, and why you would cover that beautiful wood carving in gilded paint, I don't know. I don't like it, flecked with gold, whatever. I really hate it. I like the natural wood. But Louis loved it. Everything's gold. Everything's gold. And facing east are these windows. So when Louis was holding court and you needed to talk to him, he'd go in there in the morning, he'd sit upright on his chair, his back to the mirrors, and the sunlight is coming through the windows. So as he's high up and you're elevated, the light would reflect off those mirrors, and you'd have to bow your head and squint your eyes to talk to him. All right? Did it on purpose to make you feel small, to let you know that the king was the king. And all this comes from his tutor, a guy named Father Jacques Benet, or Bishop Jacques Benet Bousseau, who said, Louis, you know why you're such a good king? Because God wanted you to be the king. He reached down and touched you, so man, you are divine right king. And Louis like 25 going, yes, I am. You are right. So he literally plans this. It's a beautiful work of art and architecture, but it was done to make you feel small. A couple of other things he did as you run around the old gardens here. is he made you put him to bed. You would have to undress him, you have to put his little nightgown on and sing him a little lullaby. Because, you know, audiences with the king are highly sought after. So he wanted to mess with you to see what you would do. What is your limit? When are you going to say no? Other people had to wake him up in the morning. And the really one that kind of is weird for me, but when it was winter, he would make somebody sit on his chamber pot and warm it up for him in the morning so he didn't have to go to the bathroom with a cold rear end. Like, who thinks of that stuff? Like, all right, Louis the 14th, all right? And if you want to talk to me, sit on my toilet for a while. I want a nice warm one when I get there, so go at it. And these aren't poor people, these are the nobles. So here is Versailles as it stands today. This was all just redone originally in 24-karat gold paint. Everything is gilded because he takes the name of the Sun King. And one of the things he did was he has this leg built, right? Everyone talks about Marie Antoinette later on putting perfume on sheep and playing peasant. That's small time. Louis heard about these big ships the Spanish had. They're bringing gold back, and he hears about these things called pirates. Well, what do pirates do? Well, they wear eye patches and they run around going, "Arg me, Mr. Shmee! All right, get Peter Pan, whatever." And they make dudes walk the plank and they drink rum. And Louis like, "Man, that sounds like awesome. Get me one. What are we going to do with it?" "I don't know, build a lake. We're going to build a pond." And so they build a 30-acre lake. And they get a Spanish galleon and they drag it in so when Louis wants to play pirate, people could go and play pirate. And when you played a game against Louis or you played pirate against Louis, Louis had to win. Like, "Oh my gosh, you guys aren't letting me win, are you?" "No, my liege. No, why would we do that?" Like, you know, all right. "Well, I thought you were, tailgate cornhole champion." "Well, kind of wore out the rotator cuff and a little stiff. And throwing pretty good, big guy, but, you got me again. Right? You're like, I'm really, really good." So, and you've got an ego when you put your face on everything, all right? So Louis had his own image reflecting like the sun was radiating from him all stinking over the place. And he takes the saying, "L'état c'est moi," all right, I am the state. He goes, "I am what the sun is to the earth, I am to France. I give France life." And all the French people, besides the nobles, loved some Louis XIV. He gave French this great era of nationalism. They were the biggest, the strongest. We make fun of the French now for the Franco-Prussian War, World War I or World War II, the old jokes. Anybody want to buy a vintage World War I weapon, dropped once, never used? You can get a French one. All right. Why are there poplar trees along the Champs-Élysées? So the Germans and the Americans can march. The Germans can march in the shade, and the Americans can liberate and march out in the shade. All right, so okay. And and it's funny. Poor French soldiers tried to fight hard. They was poorly led. But at this time, you didn't want to mess with France. I mean, France was, they were bigger, stronger, militarily more powerful than anybody else. And Louis, when he achieved this absolutism, belittling and bankrupting and tying the nobles to him, he always made sure the people benefited. So if push came to shove and the nobles rebelled, Louis had the people. And French culture, French cuisine, French etiquette, French dress, French music will eliminate that of the Renaissance and be the new vogue culture of Europe. It wasn't cool unless it was French. No less than 8 replicas, small or large, of Versailles are going to be built. Peter the Great's going to copy it with the Winter Palace in a lot of ways because Louis had one and it's rockin' cool. Now, Peter the Great's going to go big and build a whole city, but part of the little palace was like Versailles because Louis did it. Problem is, it's really, really expensive. Tell the students, Biltmore is what? I think it's 235 rooms or 255 rooms in Asheville. Versailles is 2,320. It's just enormous. So if you stretch it all out, it's well over a half a mile long and 5 stories deep. So there was a job in there where a young boy sat in a room and put firewood on the fire. Didn't cut the wood, didn't split the wood, didn't haul the wood in. He just sat in the chair and put it in the fire.